Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to all of you from Right Management and our partners, Talent Edge. Right Management is the career and talent management brand within the Manpower Group, and our partners, Talent Edge, is India's first edtech firm bringing live, interactive, anywhere learning in a digital format. Talent Edge offers courses jointly from leading institutes like IIM, XLRI, SPJN, amongst others. Uh, the idea is to enable working professionals to plan their future course of action and fast track their career. Today, Talent Edge connects over 450,000 individuals and corporate learners, providing over 250 courses from around 70 premium and international institutes. So thank you once again. And before I begin, I convey my best wishes, and I hope all our listeners and their loved ones are safe and sound in their homes and doing well. Uh, Today, I think the only topic of conversation is COVID-19 and how it's going to impact the global economy, India's economy, corporates in general, and hence we as professionals. Hence, this conversation is extremely contextual and relevant in terms of how do we manage our careers as professionals. To discuss this entire topic today, we have two very esteemed guests with us. And without much ado, let me introduce them to you. Our first guest is Mr. Krishnan V. Krishnan has a career spanning for over 30 years and is part of the management committee at Dabur, where he has worked since the year 2004. Uh, During his time in Dabur and also in various early organizations like Whirlpool, Xerox, and Aisha. He has driven a lot of transformational and excellence projects through strategic initiatives for India and SAARC region. He has demonstrated capabilities in human resource management, business process quality, knowledge management, and IT enablement with HR and business. He has extensive exposure to consumer-facing complex businesses, driving initiatives to engage an increasingly multi-generational workforce in a dynamic industry. I, in person and right management in general, has had a privilege of partnering with him at Dabur for a number of years, and his guidance has been extremely useful to us as professionals, and hence we thought his insights on this topic would be very relevant. Krishnan, welcome to this conversation.
Thank you, Prashant. Very happy to be part of this. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you. Our next guest is again a professional par excellence from the academia, Professor Rajiv Mishra. Professor Mishra has worked with companies in the corporate space like Ashok Leland and Tata Robbins Fraser. And then he got associated with XLRI as a full-time faculty since 2005. He has taught various courses and programs at XLRI, ISB, IIM, Udaipur, IIM Ranchi, Great Lakes, etc. He has also advised and worked with organizations like McKinsey, ITC, Frito-Lay, Hero MotoCorp, Larsen and Toubro, Tube Investments of India, Tata Steel, Tata Motors, Britannia, and I can go on. The list is endless. Professor Mishra has also published various operations management cases in Ivy Publishing, Case Center, etc. He has been an external assessor for the Tata Business Excellence model and has been part of the assessment team with 5 Tata companies. Professor Mishra, in his current capacity, looks after placements at XLRI, and his insights, I'm sure, will benefit a lot of us. Professor Mishra, thank you for taking time out and being part of this conversation.
My pleasure.
Thank you. So as you see, this is a very good, this mix. We have been very conscious in terms of getting representation from the corporate space and also from the academia, because careers, as as working professionals, we need to at times while we are working in the corporate space, and there's a lot of support from our existing organizations to help build our careers. And at so many times, we have to take a conscious call in terms of taking a break from a professional lives and probably revisit academia. And hence, this unique mix of representation from the corporate space and the academia for this conversation. Let me begin this conversation by going to Krishnan and asking him in terms of how Dabur has been coping with the current situation, Krishnan, in terms of ensuring business continuity. So that's one part of my question, and also wanted to get your views in terms of 3 weeks into the lockdown and probably very likely to get extended. How do you see employees coping up, and how have they changed their working style? And as an organization, how have you been supporting this entire work from home culture? So if you could sort of begin by sharing some pointers around that, we could move the conversation forward.
Yeah, sure. I'll first start on the first part of your question, Prashant. Dabur being in the consumer products FMCG space, many of our products are part of the essential items that people buy. So a lot of our effort has gone into in the initial days of liaising with the central government, trying to get clarity, working with the state governments and district administration, getting the entire manpower permissions, the transportation system going. Obviously, in the initial places, even the state machinery were not having clarity. So we had some challenges, understandably, but today we are able to ensure that very important things like hand sanitizers, liquid soaps, toothpaste, glucose, honey, Chyawanprash with the Ministry of Ayush has identified as one of the immunity boosting Ayurvedic preparations. So today all these things are available. It has been a bit of a struggle, but we have partnered with very innovatively with players like Swiggy and Zomato, some of the logistics companies who are into truck aggregation. So because we're having a lot of challenges the last mile connectivity. So a lot of these things day by day, it's a small win every day. A lot of innovative out of the box thinking. So that's what as far as the business has been. It's a tough time, but I think people have really raised their hands, and we have everyday management committee and every extended management committee reviews from about 2:30 to 6, and a lot of decisions are taken on the go, and it's a bit iterative, but we are making progress. As far as employees and people are concerned, yes, initially, I think what has happened is that there's a situation where people have to quickly learn, unlearn, and relearn. Because one has to be nimble-footed, one has to be agile. A lot of existing policies and practices may have to be revisited, may have to be quickly redefined, which is happening. I think what has happened is people have really adopted and now become comfortable with remote working with technology enablement and digital platforms. MS Teams in our office has been extremely well adopted by everyone. And people in the field are using things like Zoom calls. So connectivity, what has happened is that people realize that remote working and not physically being in office doesn't necessarily affect your ability to deliver or ability to be productive. And that has been one of the learning. And we are also engaging with the CEO, sending communication to people almost twice a week, updating on what is happening, thanking them for their support. Lot of small achievements, like for example, many times our frontline sales people who have got e-passes from the state government, because the stockist has not been able to get his boys. So many of them have taken their own motorcycles, put stuff on their bike, delivered it to the retail outlets. Sometimes in cooperative societies, putting this thing outside the gate with the help of. So a lot of these small customer service initiatives are being highlighted, recognized in common platforms within the organization. People are being applauded. So I think engaging people, motivating them, connecting them, establishing emotional connect, ensuring that everybody is healthy and safe, including their families, keeping people totally abreast of what the governments are trying to do, giving them a clear framework on how we are going to execute. I think all these goes into ensuring that we are able to deliver products and services into the market to our consumers. So that's what I would say for starters.
Thank you. Okay, so let me come to Professor Mishra, and you lead placements at XLRI. So I'm sure you would be at the center of a lot of conversation right now with students and the corporate world in general. So what's your take, Professor Mishra? COVID, obviously, there's a lot of literature right now, a lot of research in terms of how COVID is going to impact economy in general and employment in general in terms of certain roles. So what's your take in terms of, while we understand the impact is going to be across industries, but is there any, do you have a view in terms of some sectors getting more impacted compared to others? What's your take in terms of how employment in general is going to get impacted in the Indian corporate space? Your take, Professor Mishra.
So currently, the trends which we receive from after discussing with the recruiters, where our students are working or are about to do internships, I think physical supply chains, companies like Dabur and all that, would probably the impact might be short term. Financial services is one sector where we definitely see that the impact is going to be long term, and we can see that in the way they are approaching internships or approaching the job offers which they have rolled out over there. So financial sectors is one sector definitely which we see going forward might get impacted, or it will take a longer time to come back into stream. But physical organizations, especially the FMCG sector, I don't think probably should come back much faster. My own sector of education probably will get very seriously impacted. So there are a lot of challenges with the education sector too over there. Okay. But broadly, I would say that the trends are towards the financial sectors and the banks, which seem to be, take a longer time to come through. Consulting is an if thing, but consulting would probably also take a little bit of take a longer time to come back into practice. So these are the two sectors that we think might have longer term impacts.
Thank you, Professor Mishra, and probably we'll come back to and delve a bit more on this in a subsequent conversation. There's one question that I wanted to ask both of you, and Krishan, we could probably come to you first, and then we'll take Professor Mishra's views on this. Even before COVID happened, because digital disruption, there was a lot of conversation, there was a lot of talk in terms of how the world of work in general is going to change. Your view in terms of, because of the impact of COVID, how the world of work is going to change in general, and this could be both structural changes in terms of, for example, the way we come to office, the way we show up at work. For example, as you rightly said, this whole realization that work from home is actually not a bad thing, and productivity is not necessarily getting impacted adversely. Is this now going to have a more lasting impact in terms of the way the world of work is going to hope people will be more comfortable in terms of working from home, or any other changes? But generally, if you zoom out and look at the world of work per se, the way people work in general, what are some of the trends that you see are going to be here to stay?
Yeah, very pertinent question, Prashant. It's something that we have been thinking and talking a lot, and it's a double-edged sword. It cuts both ways. If I start from the consumer side, one thing we all must be clear that this is not a change or a transformation where once the lockdown lifts and life slowly comes back to apparently normal in the real world. It is not going to be normal. The first time the world has realized that a virus has put the entire world into a lockdown and brought it to its knees. So at a fundamental level, the way we think, our behavior patterns, a lot of things are going to get affected. Being in the consumer space and the CPG space, FMCG, I clearly see more focus on health and wellness. Products, which focus on health and wellness and basic subsistence are going to get priority. Discretionary spends, for example, holidays, traveling, anything which I can do without will be put on the back burner. Entertainment, a lot of these things. So So that is going to clearly to connect to what Professor Mishra was saying. So certain sectors and of the economy are going to get pretty severely impacted. I'll see demand picking up in India, maybe relatively better to other rest of the world. Maybe India and China may be a bit better, but in absolute terms, the GDP growth will come down pretty substantially, that's my view. Maybe low single digits. And obviously, that means that economic activity will be on a slow thing, and job creation going forward will take some time. So while remote working, the myths around it has busted, and we realize that it is not such a bad option. But what people also need to keep in mind is, it's a double-edged sword. Out of sight, out of mind can set in very easily. And it is very important that people who are especially at the mid to junior level and more in the executional and operational roles, you should not think that I mean, not wanting to sound prescriptive, but you run the risk of subconsciously getting into a semi vacation or a break mode. It should not happen, because if you are not getting regularly mails and there's work happening in your organization and you're not part of it, you need to worry. Because once the economy becomes all right, the lockdown opens and people start going back to the workplace, somebody is going to get up and say, oh, what was this person doing in the last 30 to 40 days? I didn't hear from him.
Yeah.
So you trigger a thought that, can I manage them without this person? So therefore, because cost pressures are going to be humongous on many organizations, I would say the first thing that all of us need to do is raise your hand, be available, see how I can add value, reach out to your manager, your HODs, and proactiveness. So while work from home is great, you also run the risk of being out of sight, out of mind if you're not proactive about what value are you adding in a remote, non-physical world. So I think that is something important.
Very relevant question. I think it's not good to be invisible in these times.
Yeah, because you need to really be aware that what is happening in your organization, what are organizations struggling with, what are the issues they're grappling with, and am I part of that action? Am I creating an impact? What impact am I creating? What value am I adding? I think that is what going to redefine the future of work in this in last 30-40 days experience this work. And if people have some people have has not dawned on them, maybe late, but better late than never. It's still a time to raise your hand and start positively and proactively contributing to the overall wellness of your organization, society at large.
So very interesting, Krishnan. What I'm hearing you say is that organizations are going to reevaluate relevance of every role with a fresh set of eyes and with a fresh set of scales. And that may, look, in terms of how then they start looking at the relevance of a role is going to be critical. That's a very interesting and pertinent point, Krishnan.
Yeah.
So let me come to Professor Mishra. Your take in terms of how the world of work is going to change. Are you seeing some short-term changes, some more lasting changes in terms of the way organizations functions and individuals function in terms of delivering to customers?
I think I would broadly agree with Mr. Krishnan's view. This is going to be the new normal, as they call it. I think the people who are in the junior and just joined 2 to 3 years work, entered the workforce in the last 2 or 3 years, while they might be tech savvy, but I think they really need to take the biggest step forward, because a lot of learning happens and we are used to learning by talking to people and physically bumping into each other. And now if remote working becomes a new norm, I mean, how do they stay relevant and how do they learn? So as Mr. Krishnan says, not only raising the hand in terms of, being available, but also creating opportunities for themselves to be able to learn from their seniors. I think people at senior levels may not face that issue because they are armed with their own networks and they can learn from each other. But I think people just into the workforces is going to be a huge challenge for them, and they really need to look at ways and means to be able to keep themselves relevant learning within the own organization.
Hmm.
I think that issue because internships which used to be physical, I mean, people going and doing an internship. So now when those internships have become from home, so we are sensing that. So while technology is not a problem for them, I think that is one big issue. The second thing I
Okay.
think from the point of view of going forward is the ability to handle ambiguity. Most of our teaching in the B schools and even engineering schools have all been around trying to find the one right answer. So 2 + 2 is 4.
Yeah.
Our objective exams have been that sense. We are only trying to find the one right answer. But in this world where we don't know what will hit us next, and I think COVID-19 is one. There'll be more such challenges as we move forward. So the ability to experiment, to test, or what Google popularly calls a versus B approach for everything, look at different alternatives. I think that is going to be a big shift, not only in the way we teach, but also in the way people approach their issues. So there's no one right answer. So gone are the days of a process optimization. By the time you optimize the process, a new challenge comes into play. So dealing with ambiguity is, as a society, as a teaching institutions, as organizations, we need to change. And I think the way we have, especially our country in India, which has been focused too much on single point examinations and objective tests and all that, we'll find it probably much more challenging than the Western world, because the ability to prototype in our country is extremely low. The ability to think, it's not a problem with the intellectual ability, but the systems which have been in place. So I think that is something which we as educational institution and Dabar's HR and all the other companies need to build in this thing of how to deal with ambiguity. The third thing, and I think that's a growing problem, and I'm also party to that, is or a victim of that, is how to manage cognitive overload. As to quote Bill Gates, who's turning out to be true every time we see a video of his, is that we have been reduced to 3-minute managers. The WhatsApp message comes in one direction and Facebook tweet comes. So how do we handle that cognitive overload, right from hitting people right from 80 to 8 over there? So that's another big challenge, because when you are going to be working remotely, the ability to concentrate, that's paramount. So that's again going to be a big challenge. And I think a lot of researchers are working on it, Lindau, London, Jaraberg. But I think these are the 3 big challenges which we see with our students entering into workforce. And those effects of that would play out when they become 30, 35. Maybe at the initial stages may not happen, but in this new normal, we really don't know. Broadly, I would agree with Mr. Krishnan, but handling ambiguity and how do we train and teach the freshers on this particular way of working would be big challenges, because we don't have new people coming into the system. So running the business might be okay, but how do we grow it and how do we get people to learn, improve, optimize? It's going to be a big challenge. I think we need to put our heads together to find some solutions as individuals and as organizations.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Mishra. I think the ambiguity point is very pertinent. As I keep saying, I mean, COVID has decided to give us a masterclass in VUCA. All of us, I think, while it was just a phase for us, all of us so far, but now we are truly living and experiencing it firsthand. So that's a very important point. So let me come to you, Krishnan, back and get your thoughts in terms of, and let's bring the working professional at the center of our discussion now. If you look internally within your organizations and conversation you have at an executive committee level, the discussion that you have within your peers and so what's the focus and what are some of the skills that you are realizing as an organization that you now need and you need to cultivate within professional within Dabar so that they are relevant, and what are those new skills that you would want to tell the working professional that, hey, this is going to be relevant not only within Dabar but in any organization that you're working? So that's number one. Number two, what's the take? Because this whole redeployment conversation, investing on individuals so that they become redeployable within the existing ecosystem within my organization elsewhere, is a very relevant conversation. What's your take in terms of patience that organizations would have in terms of investing within, on their employees, or the employees are best. They'll do themselves a favor in terms of, rather than waiting for the organization to invest on themselves, rather than getting proactive and figuring out where do I fit in the new ecosystem and reinvesting on themselves proactively. This whole redeployment conversation, is it being impacted because of the COVID conversation and the economic impact that is having? What's your take on these two elements?
Prashant, actually, I mean, what you're asking is a pretty complex set of multiple questions and issues. Let me try to kind of, unfurl it layer by layer. One thing is, if you see the Indian economy, even before the COVID crisis hit us, was going through a bit of a slowdown even before this thing actually hit us. So I think a lot of, I would say, organizations which were seeing the development on the fringes and were gearing up for it had already kind of, started working towards a um, situation where the demand forecast and consumption scenario going forward, even if I go back to say October, November, December Q3 quarter of last year, the future was not looking very, very, I would say, buoyant. So a lot of organizations started taking some corrective measure and start factoring in the next budget what needs to be done, in terms of because even the surveys which came out on increment, etc., compared to the previous years was very poor, relatively muted. Productivity was this thing. I think what has happened is overall this entire COVID scenario has probably accelerated that thinking, in a reverse direction and brought it into a more compact window. Okay, so that is one dimension that I would say at an organization level. Having said that, I don't think it's all gloom and doom. I think what organizations today are looking for is just to build on what Professor Mishra said. Ambiguity is definitely a scenario, and VUCA is definitely VUCA into the power of n. So what we need people today to do is to be agile in their thinking, and people who operate on multiple scenarios, because it is something which is evolving on a hour to hour, day to day basis. So there is no set what you think of as a plausible solution in the morning has lost its relevance by post lunch. So one needs to operate on multiple scenarios and what I'm going to do on each of these scenarios, and be very nimble footed and agile in your thinking to be able to manage this pretty amp. So that is one thing, important thing. Second, I would say, apart from your IQ, you need to develop a very strong sense of EQ also, because typically, I would say, what people say is that people who are with a very strong quant kind of a academic upbringing, which many of our academic curriculums tend to be, at least in the school to college days, tend to develop a very left-brained orientation to life. Everything is very quant, logic-based, analytical. I think this COVID situation also has taught us that, look, it is equally important to, because you don't have the luxury of having a face-to-face interaction. You can't read body language. You can't read many other senses that you can pick up in a physical world. You're operating in a phygital world, as I would call it. So EQ, in terms of being able to empathize, understand the challenges that your people are going through, especially people who are working in the front lines, be empathetic towards them, supportive, lend a listening ear. As a manager, it's very easy to get into a review and a kind of assessment mode. While that is important, but you have to equally reach out, support, provide solutions. So I think the importance of the EQ in one's managerial style or leadership style has become very, very important at this point of time. So I would say agility, scenario-based operation, ability to switch across multiple situations, think ahead of the curve, manage your own stress and stress of your team, be facilitative, be empathetic, yet ensure focus on delivery. I think it's a multiplicity of very lot of things, and being very clear that the larger macroeconomic scenario is not going to get into the green zone very easily, and not in the, like a lot of people are saying, will it be a V-shaped recovery or I would say it might be a very flattened V or a more like a U-shaped recovery, which is going to take time. And we need all to brace up for it, and we need to mentally start calibrating, because a lot of the postulates that we have been used to running our work are not going to be relevant and true once the dust settles and the lockdown lifts.
Wonderful. Your take, Christian, staying with you on the second part of the conversation, and then I'll pick up Professor Mishra's thought also on that. This whole conversation of redeployment. Will organizations have the patience, or employees really need to understand that you need to be proactive rather than waiting for an organization to reskill you, redeploy you, and you will need to take control of your own careers. What's your take on that, Krishnan? And then I'll pick up Professor Mishra's thoughts on the same aspect.
What I would say is that the time has come that everybody needs to learn something beyond their core function and their core roles.
Yeah.
Let me take a classic example of, the government is trying, the Ministry of Consumer Affairs is trying to provide, empower, they've identified list about 50 companies, at least in the FMG space, whom they're going to empower to generate their own e-passes and things like that, so that delivery can happen. And the organization working with the ministry very closely. Now this involves, the HR obviously has to be in forefront of this. You have your employee database that has to be given to work along with the line functions. Then it has to go to a portal, to understand how the ministry functions. So what I would say is that today you have to learn quickly on adjunct functions and areas which probably you never thought you would have to get into. So you need to have a, if not an in-depth understanding, but at least a 6 feet depth understanding of all other adjunct functions around you, and understand the organization at a systemic level. What I would call develop the ability to become a specialized generalist.
Yeah. That's a great phrase. Yeah.
Yeah. So therefore you need to be a specialist in your core area, but you need to have a reasonable level of specialization in many other adjunct functions for in this current ecosystem, because many things nobody has faced ever, and you're all trying to figure out the answers. So that is one thing. So I would say individuals need to see what knowledge, what skill, what piece of this thing is going to help my organization tide through this crisis. What can I do about it? What can I quickly learn and apply and provide a solution to the organization? Look, howsoever things bad the economy or business situation might be, anyone who can add value, anyone who can provide a solution, anyone who puts in that extra discretionary effort, who is willing to walk that extra mile, and has the right positive attitude, and this thing is willing to learn and contribute, will always find a place in the organization. I think as long as one takes charge of one's role in the organization and proactively starts, what I would call, a phrase I'd like to use is learning to learn. The organizations today will not have time to run programs and this thing for you. There are enough and more available information and knowledge available in the digital and technology world. There are webinars, there are online courses. If you have a couple of hours every day, invest in it, pick up your skills, learn to learn and invest on yourself. What I need to learn is also an art of learning. So learning to learn, invest on yourself, and more importantly, how do I contribute to the organization's agenda of in its business, and how do I contribute to society at large? So I think, so anybody who has the right attitude and behavior and willing to contribute, raises his hands, willing to put that discretionary effort, I don't think organizations would want to palmy move. Okay, we may go through some temporary phases of maybe in terms of, because at the end of the day there's a cost to be managed. So there may be some stopgap arrangements in terms of how do we manage costs, and employee cost is one of it. But I think to your valuable employee, asking him to move on would be the last option most organizations would want to exercise. And if you are a valuable resource, I don't think that option will come to you that quickly.
Absolutely. So, Professor Mishra, coming to you, you did mention certain skills which are going to be of more prominence. If there are any other skills that you would want to call out, happy to listen to them. And also share your thoughts in terms of how academia could help in terms of building those skills. That also, I think, would be of great relevance to our listeners. Your thoughts, Professor Mishra?
I think taking on what Mr. Krishnan said, COVID has only re-emphasized it, but the change has been pretty fast for the last many years. I mean, the automobile industry where I started, which was a mechanical product, people call it software on wheels. And you mentioned VFR. So I think the complexity of that essentially comes because everything is becoming a merger of many different technologies, whereas organizations typically have been more siloed in the future. So I think what people need to develop is what I call is from an I personality to move into a T personality. And the T personality is what Mr. Krishnan was talking about, awareness or a 6-feet level of understanding across various other domains. I think every individual should really identify that going forward, what are the adjacent technologies one person could probably make the building start to finish. Today, there are 19 trades even in making a modern building today. So what are the adjacent technologies which you need to be aware of? And this preparation needs to start from today. I mean, if it has not already started. So individually, everybody should find out if an HR person needs to know that computer scanning and AI-based selection is going to come in, start preparing for it and develop a 6-feet understanding to quote Mr. Krishnan. So I think that is one thing, to moving from an I personality to an T personality over there. We have tended to reward more I part of it, but irrespective of COVID, and that's going to be the trend which is going to do. The second thing which we see as an inhibitor to learning is that an FMCG person needs to thinks only FMCG, and IT person only thinks IT. And we face that issue when people with 4 or 5 years experience come back to learn. So the inability to look across different industries, I think that ability to be able to see, in operations we say it is a concept called clock speed. Every industry is similar, only the speed of change is different. So that whole thing that we can learn from anywhere is extremely important. Because all this volatility, uncertainty, unless you develop your own information networks, unless you interact with people outside your own area, I think that would be very, very difficult to do. And that's a mindset issue which we need to, ourselves look at. The third thing I think is the overemphasis on analytical approach. I mean, while that is important, but we have lived that thing. Stable processes, analytical approaches would work. I come from an operations management and an OR background. So those are the approaches we talk about. But I think emotional quotient, creativity, and I'm not talking about individual creativity, tools and techniques to, to have groups to be creative. Brainstorming being one of the low-end techniques in that. So I think every manager needs to even practice those techniques, because in this situation, the more the information you have, the better it is. So as they say, a lucky person, who's a lucky person? A lucky person is a person who knows a lot of people. So that's the information network which people need to build in. So I think 3 things: the ability to see, you can learn from anywhere. If hospitals today can learn from the automobile industries, I think we as individuals could also learn from other things, from an I to a T personality, and to develop skills to, create and get more creativity out of groups. I think those would be the 3 skills, if I were to list in rank order, would probably be needed. What exact skills to learn would depend on the where he works and things like that. But that belief that you need to have awareness about others is extremely, extremely important.
Okay. So let me come back to Krishnan. Krishnan, while organizations and this talent, this conversation of talent works both ways. So while there's a role that individuals need to play in terms of being fluid and reskilling themselves to keep themselves relevant, it is also equally relevant for organizations. All organizations also need to be, because strategies would change and hence the skills required would change, hence the type of people, the skills that they would need, the type of people that they would need to handle will change. So hence, how does an organization keep its talent strategies fluid? If you would share, Dabur has been a very fast evolving organization, and I'm sure you would have had uh, enough examples in your career where you would have had to be very fluent with your own talent strategy. One talent strategy and it will survive for a long period of time doesn't work. So how do organizations keep their talent strategies fluid?
Well, what I have seen, I mean, in the organization that I've worked, I think, including Dabur now, what has worked is that um, growing talent from within has always been has worked for us so far. So we have consistently hired people from engineering colleges, that is GTs, MBAs as management trainees, or the Young Sales Leader program, CAs, and supply chain professionals, and we have grown them. And coming to talent fluidity, one philosophy we have always believed in is that you know empower the individual to have candid think and have candid conversations on how he or she would like to uh, you know uh, uh, track their careers, and what kind of path they want for themselves. I mean, and one thing that we have also emphasized is that to the extent possible, try to do couple of cross-functional movements as you, instead of trying to grow vertically, try to grow spirally. So if you can do some roles adjacent functions, and then it kind of gives you a more holistic perspective of the whole thing. Of course, the very specific domain specific roles could be there, like R&D or maybe some other roles. But so what we've essentially focused on is growing your own timber, and ensuring that people have the confidence, empowerment, and the bandwidth to have candid conversations about their career and discuss and their growth paths, and ensure that uh, good critical talent from a future head of the department, or a functional head, or a CXO point of view is identified early. There's an alignment in the management committee and maybe one level below that these are the good talent, and as an organization you look at this talent as an organizational resource, and many times if someone has some options and wants to explore, we have also made other function heads or CXOs with whom he has had an interaction to speak to the person, to make him understand how he's an important resource in the larger scheme of things in the organization. So that is one thing that we have worked towards. On the organization side, we have traditionally done a lot of things, and many of things will probably continue, and some may undergo change. So we moved a lot in the frontline sales towards, I would say, gamified e-learning. A lot of our we put a lot of our people through instructional design courses, converted many of our content, and today a lot of our content is online on gamified platforms, both in manufacturing and in frontline. We have tried to move away from instructor-led training to self-paced learning. We also, at specific HOD and CXO levels, introduced executive coaching from a development point of view for people. We have also sent people to Ivy League B schools in India and overseas for exposure. So there are multiple, I would say, levers through which we have been working on the learning and development agenda, and future-proofing the organization from a skill building point of view. But I would, at the cost of repeating, I would say, I think it's important that while the organization can do all these things, the onus of learning and skilling oneself and the drive for that has to come from an individual or an employee. Because
True.
at the end of the day, the organization can provide resources, opportunities, but how to imbibe that knowledge, how to apply in the workplace, how to leverage it, it has to come. And in today's world, it's very important that one is the structured way of learning, another is the experiential learning. Today, there is so much happening around you. If you just keep your radar tuned and absorb what is happening around you, like Professor Mishra also referred some time back. And of course, it's important here to what I would call, we have the ability to differentiate noise from signal, because there is too much of information which is flowing. So you need to have the ability to pick the right information or the signal from the entire noise which is around you, and look at best practices, see how other companies are doing, what are they doing better, how other people are leveraging certain things and they're doing it better. So have the humility to learn, accept that they're doing a better job, and let me see how to learn from it. So I think as long as you have a agile learning mindset, and you're aware of your surroundings, the ecosystem, what is happening around you, the context in which your business is operating, your society is operating, I think organization will provide resources, but I think employees will have to take the ownership of taking charge of their learning agenda and their skilling also to some extent.
Sure, sure. Thank you, Krishnan. I think we are in the last 10 or 12 minutes of our conversation, so I'll want to quickly get into and pick up some very interesting questions that I have. And this one is a very specific question, and for Professor Mishra, and this is asked from Rajat. So let me pick this up one and ask you, Professor. And the question is, what kind of changes can you foresee in management consulting sector? Do you see any vertical emerging within consulting due to COVID-19? It's a very specific question, so I thought let me pick this one up first.
Specifically, I mean, post 2009/11, there was a growing body of literature which evolved thanks to a professor called Yossi Sheffi on resilience, how to build resilient enterprises. But as comfort comes in, one tends to forget that. So I think the whole entire, and most of the resilience literature which Professor Sheffi had done had actually emerged from India. Most of his case studies were from India. So how to build resilient organizations. So COVID will come and go. Dabur doesn't supply for a week, we'll tolerate it, but after a week we lose out of patience. How the ability to come back very soon. And I think the research around that, and that would be one big consulting area which would come up, is to build resilient organizations. So one is, of course, push in more inventory, and thing is one part of it, but starts from the product itself, modular products, having geographical bill of material. So there's a large body of literature which probably did not get practiced because there were good times after 9/11. And I think the emphasis on this, and of course the whole thing on digital and all that would definitely go on. But if there's one theme which I would select, would be this whole approach towards resilience. Goes by different names, but I think the founder of that is a Professor Yossi Sheffi. You can YouTube him. He's got amazing insights which he has given in 2011, 2001 when 9/11 had happened. So I think if I have to pick
I
one,
agree. Probably this is the big question. Organizations will be
Prashant, if I can
going
just
to
add to that.
Yes, yes, Krishnan, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think just to add to what Professor Mishra answered to that question, I would say leading and navigating in crisis is, I think, becoming a very, very important subject at this point of time.
Yeah, sure, great. Okay, Krishnan, question from Amit Karna for you, and if it's the same Amit Karna, I understand whom I know. I understand why he's asking this question. Very pertinent question. For Krishnan, in this new normal, how will employees be evaluated in terms of recruiting new hires, productivity assessments, collaboration with peers, promotion, etc.? So how would you be evaluating candidates going forward in this new normal from a recruitment perspective, promotions perspective, increments? Is there something new that comes up into your mind?
Look, I think there are two parts to the question. I think as far as evaluating people and their rating and increments, etc., is concerned, look, by and large, the business was in an even keel till about Jan or mid-Feb, right? So if you take a 12-month scenario, about 10.5 to 11 months was business as usual. So maybe most organizations would look that till the entire COVID turmoil happened. I think people probably take a cutoff before that and take that window as the window of assessment, maybe from a appraisal and rating and things point of view, is my guesstimate from my interaction in my network. As far as future, I think evaluating candidates and those things are concerned, I think apart from things,
From a new hire's perspective, probably that is something that people will be very interested. From a new hire, management cadre, recruitment, anything. Is the process going to change? New things to watch out for?
I think, in fact, it's already happening because a couple of Skype and MS Teams interviews that I've been part of. So one question which is being pretty regularly asked now is, tell me one crisis situation which you're not prepared for that you have dealt with, and irrespective of whether you came out successfully or not, what is the situation? What did you do? What was your learning out of it? I think this is typically these questions in a panel more asked by, I think, the HR people, but I think now line managers are proactively asking these questions on.
True.
So
okay.
I think
Wonderful.
That's why I said managing in crisis and your ability to navigate in crisis is becoming a very focused area. Is a person able to maintain his intellectual and emotional balance and yet navigate in a very volatile VUCA environment and in a crisis situation where nothing is defined and nothing can be predicted.
Okay. So let me come to you, Professor Mishra, and this question is from Anshuman, and I think you would be dealing with this target audience in your executive education stream a lot. The mid-40 professional who comes back to the campus with the single objective that I want to change my industry. How does one go about? Any suggestion that you would have for that target audience? Now he says that, hey, this sector is going to be in trouble now, I want to change my sector. 40, mid-40, already been in industry, there's a stamp on you. What's your advice to that individual? How does one go about navigating that change?
The short answer to that, it is extremely difficult. Recruiters for a person at 40, 45 to change a sector is extremely difficult. In boom periods, it has happened. I wouldn't say that. But in general, our experience has been that it is extremely difficult to change an entire sector. You are in an IT sector, you are in operations, you can probably move to IT consulting, but broadly, fundamentally changing your sector in our experience has been 1 to 2% of the case. So if a person is joining with the sole objective that he would change his thing, it is risky. And that's the experience of, I'm talking about the experience of the last 13, 14 batches. We also run a 1-year program. I mean, we have only people with 7 to 8 years experience. So if it is larger than that, I assume that it is going to be very difficult. But to add on to Mr. Krishnan's thing, I think two things which, or rather one thing which recruiters are trying to find out is learnability. I mean, does this candidate develop learnability? And a lot of the candidates are not able to demonstrate that. So questions like what technologies do you regularly track? Most people fall flat on that because somehow in class 12th we prepare for the IITs, in IITs we prepare for the IIMs, and enter the IIMs or XLRI you are preparing for the job. So people don't live in the present and learn. So it's a rolling stone which happens, and that's an attitude which needs to change, because if recruiters are going to look at learnability, you've got to have a different way in which you approach academics and things of that particular sort. I think the change from what you know to be able to learn is going to be a big change. And very difficult to assess. I mean, HR people would struggle to evaluate that, but I'm sure they would love to do that. And I can see a lot of questions going around those things. So I think that ability to demonstrate that you can learn, obviously it has to come from within, but even otherwise, I think that's going to be a big change. So living on the brand and the fact that you join a premier B school, I think its importance will come down. Knowledge is becoming democratic. And therefore, I say that the biggest, I think, one of the industries going to be hardest hit by COVID is the education industry itself. So as long as regulation is there, to relevant. But the moment the regulatory environment goes and you don't need to be an AICTE approved institution or an IIM bill, we'll probably be struggling in the next 3 to 4 years if we don't innovate.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Professor Mishra. Okay, Krishnan, a question for you from Sachin Srivastav, and let me read it out to you. As a marketing professional, where there is need for personal meetings in a time like this when we are collaborating via the online mode, would you think that these methods of engaging may lead to a decrease in customer reach? And I'm sure in your line distribution, would be very relevant. So your take on this.
I would say, I'm just, if I look at the window in which we are operating right now, remote working, I think a relatively one advantage the consumer products in the FMCG space has is that since many of the products in the FMCG are part of essential items, and the government is supporting us to reach up, make these products and distribute and reach it in the last mile. We have got transportation infrastructure issues, but they are still connected to the ground, and we are getting a lot of feedback on what retailers are saying, which is the consumer voice. So our consumer connect has still not got totally eroded. That's why we are reasonably clear as to what people are looking for, what are going to be the likely changes to their buying patterns, consumer behaviors, and buying habits going forward. So I think we are relatively in a slightly better situation because we are still there in the physical world and trying to manage it through the digital and IT infrastructure. Well, so already a lot of discussions happening on new product development going forward. What are kind of areas we need to focus on? So that way, I think, yes, it is a challenge, but it's not a insurmountable challenge. So therefore, I think we need to listen more. We need to get more perspective. We need to, in fact, our salespeople and marketing people are in regular touch with distributors, some of the big retailers, the modern trade outlets, e-commerce people, trying to look at trends, what is happening. So you get surrogate measures of the consumer voice and work on that. So, but in certain industries, it may not be possible. It's a challenge, but I think if you fundamentally have a focus towards somehow trying to understand the consumer voice in whatever way, directly or in a surrogate way, I think it gives you a good compass to navigate.
Wonderful. Okay, so I think we are almost time. We are just a minute left, so I'll take the liberty of asking one more question. And this question, Professor Mishra, to you is from Santosh Kumar. What are some emerging skills a technical person should know in today's scenario?
I think the broad skills which any technical person, he's referring to the IT field or is in general?
Well, not specifically mentioned in the question, but let's assume IT professionals.
So definitely the field of data and data analytics is a growing field, and I think it will only grow as time comes in. If you're looking at surrogate measures, the surrogate measures will come through the behaviors and the trends captured through data. So I think that will definitely keep on growing over there. So things around that, things around how to experiment, to choose between two different alternatives. So the fundamentals of statistics behind all of that, I think those would be the skills which would be valued as you keep going along. I think the other thing which probably will come in is a lot of gig economy would also come in. So a lot of things would be crowdsourced. So the ability to connect and develop across organizations, technologies around that will also become very, very relevant. Procter & Gamble did a very great job on connect and develop, even outsourcing its R&D to the general public at one point in time. So I think those things will get revisited. But I think broadly, if you choose one thing, it would be around data analytics. Would definitely be a growing thing. We see that trend at least going forward to the next 3 to 4 years, definitely.
Okay, great. So thank you. I think this brings us to the end of our time. Thank you, Professor Mishra. Thank you, Krishnan, for your insights. I'm sure our listeners would have benefited from your thoughts. This conversation can go on and on. I think there are no absolute right answers. There's no one directional answers, and probably as we get deeper into the COVID thing and as things emerge, probably there'll be new insights for us to explore and discuss. And probably at some point of time, we'll come together again and pick up the conversation once more. I thank our partners, TalentEdge, once again for being part of this platform. And thank you to all the listeners who have logged in. I hope this was time well spent. Thank you once again. Be safe. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones. And let's hope we all come out of this challenging times very quickly and unscathed as much as we can. Thank you so much once again. Take care. Bye.
Thank you, Prashant. Thank you, Right Management. Thank you, TalentEdge. It was a great learning experience. Thank you for the opportunity.